aware that some of our internet is delivered by giant cables under the sea, and every now and then they get attacked by sharks? Every time your internet doesn't work and you can't get your Netflix episode, don't curse Optus, don't curse Telstra, curse the sharks.
It could be the sharks.
They may be attacking the undersea cables trying to get your internet. Hello and welcome to BigCon Podcast, the podcast dedicated to demystifying and simplifying the world of strategy, exploring its impact on businesses and individuals who have either harnessed it or perhaps missed the mark. I am Dale Lazinski, big business nerd and self-proclaimed content aficionado.
And I'm Emily Kay. We're doing full names today. I'm Emily Kay. I'm a Harvard degree candidate.
Just keeping your toes, Em. And while we're keeping your toes, we're also bringing our listeners in on the con, sharing the valuable lessons from both the failures and triumphs who've come before us. And we've got a failure.
We do.
Tell us, while our internet is still working right now, tell us where we're going. Who are we talking about today?
Yep. Okay, let's go. So if you are an Australian that existed in 2023, you heard about this. Due to this disaster, for an entire day, for at least 9 hours, hospitals could not receive or make phone calls. 400,000 businesses could not make sales. Internet for 10 million customers was down, and trains did not run.
Did we get hacked?
Well, I'll tell you, Dale. Stewie, the snake catcher, was also affected and couldn't help catch snakes, which I think may be the most Australian consequences I've ever heard of.
Not Stewie.
Well, I'm, of course, talking about the huge Optus outage. So for our international listeners, because, we have international listeners.
All 7 of you.
Optus is one of the largest telecommunications companies in Australia. And on the morning of 8th of November 2023 at 4 a.m, they experienced an outage and it caused chaos. Dale, were you impacted by it at all?
I've been scorned by Optus before and I've left. Also, if you want to sponsor us, Optus, let us know. We'll clear up our messaging. But I'm not a Optus customer.
No, I'm with Telstra, and I catch the tram to work. So I didn't realize until someone was like an hour late to work. I was just like, what's happening?
I didn't realize, so I just didn't hear from several friends for the day. And I was like, where have you been? And they're like, oh man,
Yeah, it's crazy. It was crazy. It was crazy. And the thing was, Optus customers were furious because they had no answers. No one was telling them anything. So they were just sitting around guessing. Things were thrown around like heck. I mean, Dale, that's the first thing you went to, due to the fact that this actually had happened to them a year prior. So a year ago, millions of customers had data stolen, and there was even a ransom and a threat that would release 10,000 names every day until the ransom was paid. And I think they did release 10,000 names.
Yeah, they released it. Yeah.
It was completely wild.
Strike one, some might say.
So this is all going on, and our CEO, Kelly Bayer Rosmarin, is on the defense.
Kel.
Yeah, she does a radio interview. But customers are pissed off because they're not spoken to directly.
Was the most reactive approach.
Yeah, it was dead silence for ages. No one knew what was going on. And, the CEO, even upon reflection, has sort of not really worried about it. She said, every telco has outages. It's happened before and it will happen again. We've restored the network in the same day, and we will get all the learnings from that to make sure that it doesn't happen again and remains an extremely rare occurrence. But people didn't think that that was good enough. And while they did restore the network on the same day. It took until 12:30 p.m. to realize what had happened, 9 hours after it went down. And things were not restored evenly. So one area would come up before another. So there were some people who had coverage again. But Dale, let's talk about what actually did happen. We're going to do that through a famous Dale-style metaphor.
Ooh.
Say you're painting a picture and you think you've just about finished, but then you realize the sunflower could be better. So you add just a bit more to the sunflower. But you're so focused on that sunflower that when you take a step back, the whole painting's just off. But you can't figure out what you did to the sunflower that turned off the whole painting. You really didn't think that the sunflower would have that much impact on the whole painting. And here's where my metaphor starts to go off the rails a little bit.
As all good Dale metaphors do.
We just have to believe in magic a bit. We'll just go with it. So you now realize that every painting in your studio that has a sunflower in it is also whack. So like all of your paintings are stuffed. but you don't know how or why. You just know that updating the sunflower caused it. Well, surprise, surprise, Dale, I am not talking about a sunflower. It was a routine software update that just took down the whole thing.
Did everything. Yeah.
Just everything. So in a statement from Optus that did come out down the line, they said, these routing information changes propagated through multiple layers in our network and exceeded preset safety levels on key routers, which could not handle these. And this resulted in those routers disconnecting from the Optus IP core network to protect themselves. So basically, there was a bit of information that went through. The router went, ugh, don't like that, and went and took itself offline. And that just went dit, 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 around all the routers. So they were all out. They didn't know what thing from this update had knocked it out, which is why it took so long to fix it.
Comment 1. It was really scary to see how reliant Australia is on one company and one company's stuff up. We lost infrastructure, we lost our emergency services, et cetera, based on that. Terrifying. Similarly, are you aware that some of our internet is delivered by giant cables under the sea, and every now and then they get attacked by sharks? And so, listeners, every time your internet doesn't work and you can't get your Netflix episode, don't curse Optus, don't curse Telstra, curse the sharks, because they may be attacking the undersea cables who are trying to get your internet. Go on.
It really is crazy. And so Optus were quite reliant on third-party providers here for the infrastructure, and it's a very intricate ladder. So it is unsurprising that something like this might happen. But there doesn't really seem to be a solid plan for when it all goes down. Like, there's not a lot of redundancy there, and a lot of experts question the level of redundancy that we have. But it's apparently really expensive to have redundancy for everything that it might need redundancy for. But the consequence of this not having redundancy was Optus suffered a huge exodus of customers. There were lines down the block at Telstra and Vodafone on the day that it went out. So they're the other leading providers in Australia, with customers trying to switch over before, this is in the morning, before because no communication had been made. So they didn't know. It
was a big enough bump that Telstra was able to report it at their AGM later that week. They were like, oh, we expect a bit of an increase in members. If the Optus keeps sucking up every year, it's great for their bottom line.
And that's exactly what I was going to say. If you've got 2 incidences in just over a year, it just ain't it. And the customers are suffering the consequences, and Optus is losing customers because of that. While losing customers is a bad outcome, and we're a business podcast and that's what we talk about, probably the worst outcome from all of this was that people were unable to call 000. So that's
horrendous.
So that's 911 for Americans, emergency services if you're somewhere else. People on mobile phones were able to call 000 because the Australian government has put in regulation for cell providers that if someone loses service, they should be able to call 000 on whatever available cell towers there are. And the telecom companies have played ball with that, which is great. So people on mobile were able to get through, but people who had a landline were not. So hospitals, there's a lot of hospitals on landlines, and my friend takes calls for the ambulances and works in dispatch. And she just said it was a complete nightmare, but especially for the elderly or country dwellers who may still be reliant on landlines. So, and they're people who really need emergency services when they need them. So the thing is while this impacted Optus as a business, the outage also really cost the Australian economy. Businesses couldn't sell things, people couldn't access emergency services, others couldn't get to work, and some were stuck because their workplace had that double login feature where they've got to get like a text verification and just never came through. So they're just like, well,
it's just a hilarious,
I can't get into my emails.
Byproduct, isn't it? Around it's meant to be for cybersecurity, which Optus is all too aware of, and they've got this thing where it's actually stopping them being able to access it. It's pretty funny.
Yeah. And so some people, Dale, are raising the question, is shit happens from the CEO good enough when an entire society relies on your service? So how much redundancy can we afford, and is important to have in place? And when you yourself don't know, what can you communicate to your customers in a situation where it's we're trying to investigate? Also, does the government have sort of more responsibility to intervene here? So help the telecom companies operate now that we're so damn reliant as a society on this function. So these are just some of the questions that bubbled up from this event for me. Should we chat about it properly after the break?
Let's take a break and go quickly because the service is working for now. We just never know. We'll never know when those sharks might come at us.
Okay, we are back. Dale, there's a few things that I'd love us to discuss, but one of the first things I'd like to bring in, which I sort of touched on, is running a business. I feel you need to know and understand how critical your service is. For example, if someone's mop breaks, it's going to be pretty annoying if they're trying to mop. But they're probably not going to swear off that mop brand forever, and they might just pop down to the local Woolies and buy the mop again, this exact same mop. They don't care. They don't care that the mop's broken. If they are reliant on you to do their work, that, you know, get in touch with people, transport, run around their day, and all the things that are important to them to function, your product is extremely important, and they may swear off it if they can't do all the things that they need to do. What do you think kind of impact that has for Optus and like our telecommunications, and like, is there something that they can do about it?
I think for me, the bit that concerns me is the almost single point of failure. So I am not a telecommunications engineer, and I appreciate that it was probably very complex. Like these things happen, and I think what really scares me is that this seems like, and perhaps this comes in how they communicated it, something that was seemingly innocent in terms of a software upgrade. We do it every night when we charge our phone and we go update software.
Yeah.
And so in terms of how that's communicated out, everyone's going, what do you mean it was just a software update? Why can't you get that right? And so I think opportunity to communicate better in the complexity of what may maybe happen there. And the metaphor did some benefit to that, but still it seems so simple. And so I think that is where the concern is, to go, are you telling me that at any one moment someone could accidentally put a 1 instead of a 0 into a box and we'll lose our entire infrastructure? We're increasingly moving towards a cashless society because everyone's like, oh, our wallets and everything, our credit cards are on our phone, our ATMs, we won't use cash. And so all of a sudden you remove that.
We use networks for the tapping, like the tapping users, so everything would be out.
Yes, shit happens, but it has become increasingly scarier and more detrimental for that shit to happen. So probably a bit tone deaf to say that example. I also wonder if this, because Optus is a private company, it's owned by Singtel, and I wonder if they were a public company, there would have been more of a visceral reaction because you would have seen it on the stock market. Right now, it doesn't seem like there was enough. Spoiler alert: Cal gets let go, so the CEO is gone from this, and bit of a sacrificial lamb.
Yeah,
she wasn't the one who pressed the go on the software update, but sure, she's the one who should be held accountable.
Yeah, and she's the one that handled communications,
or lack thereof,
and they were horrendous.
Correct, and she was criticized of as well during the hack as well. And while the Singtel board at the time stood behind Kelly, and so they should have, because she was very new in that space, I felt like it was unfair. She took the job, and about 2 months later, there was the giant hack. And so there's almost a bit of it was the last guy.
Yeah.
But then there's the time in which to get it right. And so I think for me, there's probably some looks beyond just the CEO and who they're putting in that position. It doesn't seem like it's a great space right now.
I think that the consequences are bad. People are losing their jobs because of a little single fault. I've worked in software. I know how easy that is to do.
Things don't happen all the time.
But if you have to understand that something like that is going to have dire consequences for your business, depending on how critical your product is. And this is an extremely critical product. And I think that it seemed like with the communications, there was no empathy for understanding how critical it was. It was like, yeah, we get it, we're going to fix it. But it's like, no, like you're interrupting like critical healthcare services, people's workday and people's income that's going to buy their food later. It was a huge disaster caused by something really, really small. And so it does become a public responsibility issue, which is why it's like, I wonder if you're a business who understands how critical this is, do you need to work with governments more, i.e. the O redundancy on mobiles? Can you work with governments more to ensure that your customer services are not disrupted. So, for example, there's a button that you can press that everyone just switches to the Telstra network because you have an agreement with Telstra that if one of you goes down, the other one will take on all the customers for like 10% of the income for the day, or
The
take
load
the
or whatever it
entire
is, yeah.
income for
Yeah.
the day. And that will not cause people to, because people won't leave Telstra if they're all of a sudden on the Optus network, and things can still function. That's probably so expensive and ridiculous
Just be
to
clear,
set
we
up.
can't get a software update, right? So that one seems concerning, but I like the thinking.
But like this is the type of thinking that I think needs to be done around, because otherwise it's just going to be massive. Once then if Telstra has an issue, then everyone's going to go back to Optus. Like it's
probably quite a foreign thing to understand that we're so reliant on 3 companies roughly who own most of our infrastructure. Like we are, as much as we're a big country, we're also very small in comparison to, and so American audience listening going, what do you mean? There's 15 different telephone providers. No. We have 3 who own
even
the infrastructure.
Optus owns a bunch of them too. So like Dodo Mobile and broadband internet, all owned by Optus. So it's like there were all these like sort of satellite companies that people are through that like were affected as well because they're all on the Optus network.
On the topic of empathy, from memory, when Optus got hacked, I seem to recall the CEO having a teary and being very emotional and being like, I can't believe this happened. I'm so sorry. Blah, 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 blah. Would that have worked again if she got on 3AW? Yeah.
Absolutely not.
Really interesting,
but also hacking is different so that's something that, you can boost your cybersecurity all you want. Hackers are great. Like it's almost like there's a villain, right, that you can point to in a
Whereas
hacking.
this is incompetence.
This is incompetence. Yeah. This is, we've done this. We pushed out this software update and we've done this. And I think it was really interesting.
Or as it were, that we don't know what's going on.
But maybe empathy in a different way in terms of like, we know how critical this is. I'm going to give you an update every 20 minutes. We're going to give you updates every 20 minutes to your email addresses, because they'll have all the email addresses.
Do you know the line that she gave? I wasn't communicating because there was the expectation that the CEO would be doing things to fix the situation.
Oof, no. Because that's really dumb.
Oh, no.
Yeah, because that's really dumb because you're not a technician.
Because she's not in the server room sitting there uploading new softwares and turning it on and off again, is she?
You're not a technician. Your job is to hold stuff together. That's not where she needed to be at that time. Or, great, if she's not making the announcements, you've got the head of communications doing that. Because what else is the head of communications doing in this situation? That is their job. So handball it. If you've got other stuff to do, handball it. That's part of your job too. I also understand the fact that like hindsight, and this is like what our entire podcast is built on. I understand the fact that hindsight is 2020. There is a serious level of reputation on the line as well, like how you manage these situations. And there's been enough disasters for you to look back and reflect, okay, and every single time we've talked about a critical disaster, we've talked about communication to the stakeholders every time. And it's always even more of a disaster.
Where's, like, surely there's a bunch of binders. You have like the alien invasion binder, sharks are eating the cables binder. Someone stuffed it's like
the Leslie
upload.
Knope from Parks and Rec with all her different binders.
Just pull it out and be like, interview at, and it's got one page on it that says interview at 3AW at probably in the afternoon, maybe. That's fine. We should know what's going on by then.
It's like, yeah, all right. Maybe if I own a mop company and someone's mop breaks, I don't need to give them updates every half hour on the dot. But understand what your customers need from I think that's the thing. Like, it's like, understand what your customers need from you and your product, and how your communication should reflect that.
Now, Em, I'm going to underscore this with one final thought around why they didn't do this.
Yep.
If they were on the Optus network, how are they going to be communicating? So maybe we should get off our high horses, because they're sitting there going...
Maybe that's why they did the radio interview.
Yeah. That's all they could do. They pulled out the old Morse code generator and chucked a message out because they just didn't know. That's 100% a possibility. I find it difficult to believe they didn't
find 7,000 news media outlets that were willing to post those.
Like just tapping on the doors.
Yeah.
Writing letters. Oh, maybe that's what's coming. Maybe they were just like, we've got to communicate out. We can't.
We've got to
have
work
them
out a
try
letter
snail
writing.
mail.
Yeah, got to work out a letter writing.
So very
campaign.
soon we're going to get an onslaught of what's happening from Optus through mail. Because I think the opposite is scarier, is that they've got their own secret network that they don't give to the public.
Yeah, that's true.
Shark proof. Well, listeners, there you have it. You understand a little bit more of the con. We hope that you have avoided having a business that's susceptible to software updates and killer sharks in the future. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the Big Con podcast. It not only supports us, but it means you'll get all the latest episodes straight to your device unless there's an outage. Do not keep all the fun to yourself either. Share the con around to your mother, your aunt, your best friend's brother. You can even use snail mail. Tell them to check us out on all their favourite podcast apps. For any details, please head over to our website, bigconsultingagency.com, and sign up to the mailing list. Bye for now.
Thanks, Dale.
This podcast was recorded at the land of the Woiwurrung language groups. Always was and always will be Aboriginal land.